Welcome troops, it's me TheTacticalBrit and I'm here with the first of a large series of tips videos on Rainbow Six Siege. Now today we're going to be discussing how to reduce the amount of deaths you get when you engage an enemy and maximize how many kills you can manage in some of these engagements. Today specifically we're going to be looking at the vast majority of engagements in Rainbow Six Siege which revolve around angles that you can hold or take on in the game and how to utilize them most effectively. So, to start off with, something we need to lay down the framework for is aiming in Rainbow Six Siege from both the offensive and defensive positions in the game. Aiming in Rainbow Six Siege is actually very different fundamentally to most other shooters on the market because you'll find in Siege that players actually predeterminedly set up their shots before they take them on. In Rainbow Six Siege, before you take on a room or perhaps take on a target, you will likely know the general position of that person, and you will also likely know if you've used a drone or perhaps have come across them beforehand that they are in a certain spot. Once that becomes a case, which it more than likely is in most engagements in Rainbow Six Siege, you simply have to line up the shot before you actually take on the engagement. I can very easily duck behind cover or wait behind a wall, angle up the shot that I'm going to take, and then strafe and get the kill. It's very simplistic, and this is a commonly used tactic in Rainbow Six Siege that ultimately equates to a lot of deaths for both defenders and attackers, and is something that could be very easily avoided in Rainbow Six. I'd say a good 70 to 60% of engagements in Rainbow Six are in positions where people have already known, or positions that are common within a map. So for example, if I'm taking on an opponent in an objective room, I may know that he's likely in that corner because that's where most people go when they're defending the room. I may have used a drone to scout out his location, or I may have strafed him at an entry point beforehand, or come into a brief engagement to roughly give me his location in the first place. It's very common in Rainbow Six that players will run past doorways or have a quick peek at the room that they're going into and take on an enemy without actually killing them. They'll probably take each other's health a little bit, but there will be no kill or death trade-off, so as such I will know that they're in that location. And this is the fundamental problem with most players in Rainbow Six Siege, and the biggest flaw that most players have when they play the game, and I do it sometimes myself when I forget to keep this in mind. And that's when you've come across an engagement or your position's been scouted out or somebody is aware of your location, because it's a common one, people tend to sit in the same locations even after they've been discovered. Most people become very complacent and stubborn once they've had that initial engagement or have the understanding that somebody has scouted out their location. For example, if I'm a defensive operator holding a very good angle on a window or a doorway and I have a brief engagement with another player, most players, I'd say a good 80% of them commonly in this situation, will continue to hold that angle and continue holding that position even though the enemy operator is very aware that they are there. And this ultimately leads to just very swift deaths whereby the offensive operator can simply set up his shot, strafe the player, and kill them almost instantaneously. At the same time though, you might not want to reposition because holding an angle on a certain doorway or window could be fundamental to defending that room or objective and ultimately winning the game. So today I want to give you 3 quick ways you can solve this problem, continue to hold an angle, but reduce how easily you're killed through predetermined shots in Rainbow Six Siege. And that involves stance, closeness, and positioning. The fundamental goal of changing these 3 variables is to increase delay time for your opponent. So when you're taking on an engagement from either a defensive or offensive operator, you'll want to make the engagement as difficult as possible for them. And by doing so, you're making their reaction time slower, you're making it harder for them to adjust to an engagement, and you're just making things ultimately more difficult for them to kill you. So let's give an example in terms of stance. So in this example, I am defending the double window on house by holding a specific angle, and there is an offensive operator who has decided to challenge me. We've had a brief engagement, or he's droned me, so he knows my position, but I really want to hold this angle because I know that this is going to be vital to preventing players from getting into the room. On the offensive operator side of things, it's very easy to take me out. Now, because they know my position, because they know I'm standing up, they simply just have to set up a shot, strafe me, spray, and hope that they land a headshot or a couple of body shots to take me down. But if by simply changing my stance to a crouch, suddenly things have become a bit more difficult. I've added another variable to the mix, and I've made the engagement more challenging for the attacking operator. If he tries that strafe again, he will simply miss and adds a delay element to the engagement. So when he goes to strafe across, he's going to see I'm not there. It will create an element of panic. He'll try and shift his aim. And by the time he's successfully done that, that added delay time could be the time I need in order to kill him successfully. The same applies to the prone position, crouching or standing, and simply by mixing up your stances, you're adding an element of delay for the operator when he's trying to take you on, and as such, it gives you the home advantage. Next up is closeness. This is actually something that throws a lot of players off, and it is something that is done very commonly. Now, when a player engages a room or tries to take you on, it's likely that they have a predetermined or preset idea as to how far away in the room you are and what kind of tap fire or burst fire they're going to use in order to compensate for that distance, especially with players using assault rifles. But if I change that and come closer to the enemy, that actually makes life a lot harder for him because, again, it adds another element of surprise and it adds another layer of delay to the engagement. I slow him down, he's surprised, he has to adjust his firing pattern, adjust where he's aiming, and within that short few seconds or milliseconds even, I have the home advantage and I can take him down first. And I'm surprised players don't do this more often. Simply by coming a little bit closer or edging a little bit further away, you're throwing off almost an entire preconceptual idea for how the player is going to take you on. Now, when you go to engage a player, you probably think, hey, he's at the back of the room, I'm going to use some burst fire. I need to be really accurate. I need to aim for a headshot because it's a very far distance and damage drop-off is something that I need to consider. Most players will passively, either consciously or unconsciously, go through that decision-making process before they open up an engagement. So if I shift my closeness and a player goes in to tap fire me at range, when I'm up close and personal in his face, suddenly he has to switch to an automatic pattern to take me on at close range, he has to move his aim again, and again, I've added another layer of delay, it becomes more difficult, and it's likely that that extra delay is what's going to get him killed rather than me. The final option is positioning, and this sounds relatively simple, but it's something a lot of people don't do. For any given angle, there are probably 3 or 4 different positions that will offer you relatively decent cover. Now, of course, when people are attacking the room, there'll be things that you need to bear in mind, like maybe certain other angles will make other positions untenable because they're exposed. But, for example, in the double window situation, I can think of at least 3 or 4 different positions within the master bedroom that make that optional to defend. And simply by rotating position every once in a while and every once with an engagement or every time I'm spotted by a drone, I have the ability to add more levels of information and questioning to the other operator. So if an attacker comes in with a preset idea that I'm going to be in the small adjacent wardrobe and bookshelf area, and suddenly I'm actually behind the bed or sitting behind one of the objectives, that completely throws him off, that adds an entire new dimension of delay time to his engagement, and gives me a home field advantage as well. The same principle for positioning, stance, and closeness also applies to when you're attacking as well. If I were attacking a window from a certain angle and I suddenly switch my stance to go upside down, or I take it on from an entirely different angle, it creates elements of surprise, and that's ultimately what you need to do to reduce the amount of deaths you gain and the amount of kills you can get within any given engagement. So guys, I hope that helps out, and I hope some of these examples have been useful. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. As always, it's been me, TheTacticalBrit, and thank you for watching.